Good morning, YouTube. It has been a long time since I've done any videos, and that has to do with, originally working a lot and working on schoolwork to include my dissertation, which I've actually started. Um, but now it's more like the depression, the job search, and doing the dissertation. Mostly the depression of it all because I'm freaking out because I don't have a job. I'm jobless. I'm looking for a job. And on top of that, the compounding schoolwork and dissertation. I've actually begun my lit review for the dissertation, which is actually going to be chapter 2, technically, which is about 30 pages minimum. Um, and that's just the beginning. Um, I've been a little behind in doing my assignments lately because I'm just, that depressed. But I'm caught up to date, sort of. The assignment I just submitted a few minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, um, was a summary of my lit review to date and an introduction into it. I'm hoping I did alright. I noticed that I skimped on following the instructions, which I'm hoping the professor won't kill me for. I'm hoping it'll only be like a 30, maybe 40 point loss. Hopefully. I also have not been doing daily replies to fellow students like I should, which means my participation grade is gonna skip, which I should be worrying about because I currently have a B and I could end up with like a C or something, which would really, really, really be bad. I think a C is still passing in the doctoral program. If not, I'm screwed, like, royally. But let's hope I'm not. I am passing. I shall pass this class. I have passed this class. So, anyways, what I was going to make this video for. My dissertation is going to be about sexuality and sexual education and the importance thereof. Um, I was initially intending to do a replication study, but now it looks like it's going to be a modified replication study. But enough on that. The reason I bring this up is because I just recently saw Ashly Mardell's video, What Do You Call a Queer Person? And that got me thinking. I'm doing my dissertation on sexuality and education, so, it actually does stem to think about what do we actually call people who are sexually or romantically different. Um, I kind of agree with Ashly Mardell in that queer kind of covers it all. But it does um, kind of have negative connotations for the older generations. So I think, you know, romantic and sexual minorities or sexual and romantic minorities may be a better alternative or some version thereof. Um, the LGBT is traditional yet outdated and does not represent everybody. I don't like LGBTQ because, while questioning is part of the whole LGBT process, I don't think everyone stays questioning for long. They're either straight, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, demi, asexual, aromantic, something of that nature. They progress. Two-soul, gender fluid, pan, that there's just so many sexual and gender minorities for us long, arduous, drawn out acronym. I personally am slightly a traditionalist, so LGBT community would be alright. Although I do see how queer would be more inclusive. Did y'all know that in 2013, the National Park Service added to the National Record the place in, let me think of it, it's Fire Island, New York, to the National Register as the first American gay and lesbian town, or America's first gay and lesbian town. It was added on June 4th, to be precise. It's called Cherry Grove, and actually it's the Cherry Grove Community House and Theater, which was placed on the National Register. Cherry Grove began as a part of the historical gay and lesbian community, beginning its journey in the 1920s. It's historically been very gay friendly, and it's pre-Stonewall, or pre-Stonewall era. I'm not really going to go into the whole history of the LGBT movement or the queer movement, but I do believe that it is important. And while LGBT students and teachers have traditionally been ostracized and purged, it isn't right. History needs to be a part of history. Otherwise, we are denying a part of America, a part of history, a part of the world which influences everyone's daily actions, especially leaders. Sexuality is a powerful driving force in social and organizational development. In the 1920s, Harvard purged homosexuals on campus, whether it be teachers or students, under the administration, which that's an Ivy League school. I mean, they had a reputation to maintain, and I don't think we should get restrained in maintaining these appearances, but rather embrace sexual identity and sexuality for what it is, and that's a part of us as humans and a part of society. Um, Most educational institutions stay gender polarized, which kind of strikes fear either on two sides. Heterosexuals who fear homosexuality, or let me make sure I made that straight. Heterosexuals that fear homosexuality, or homosexuals who are sexually or gender non-conforming, which would make clear the proper term. Um, Sexual and gender identity become restrictive when people believe in fixed notions of sexual and gender identity and stay fixated on heteronormativity. Um, Whereas mutable or changing views, like those within the queer community, um, can make everything a little less rigid and more open and acceptable. Um, LGBT history has changed over the years, um, but one thing is clear: LGBT and queer history is markedly absent from education and educational experiences within the United States. Um, Educationally, the historical element has been left out of the normative textbooks and histories because of homophobia, heterosexism, and a general lack of them actually caring because of heteronormativity. Heterosexuality has actually been considered the norm. So, when it's viewed as right or the normative, it's generally going to make a gap in the history because they view it as a sin or view it as something negative. Sexuality is important because it defines or describes a rubric of sexual health, activities, and relationships. When teens and young adults experiment with each other and themselves to find out who they are sexually, um, they often find that sexual education defines it as risky and dangerous, but their experiences show that it's pleasurable and fun, and that they actually want to partake of these experiences. Um, Many educational professionals believe that sexuality and sexual education is important because the teaching of the concepts of sexual behavior within society and culture are important to how these behaviors are portrayed and perpetuated. Um, Comprehensive sexuality education has generally been how this has been brought forward, because the teachers think it is important. However, while teachers instruct in topics ranging in importance and correlation to sexual education, they often do this in how their own sexuality is engendered, or how they shared their sexual inclusive topics with others as they develop sexually. So either they will be anti-inclusion on the heterosexual, or they will be pro-inclusion on the homosexual or queer perspective, typically. Now, this does range in variance. According to William Barber and Mohammed Tarabi, teachers often view sexuality education as important and socially relevant within their communities, but tend to not include sexuality behavior as part of their educational process, but nevertheless stress the importance of sexuality and sexual education. Whew. But educators and parents seem to be at odds about what to include in sexuality education. It's been proven that comprehensive sexuality education reduces or delays sexuality and sexual activity within teens. However, some people are convinced that sexuality education deals with moral values and has no place within the schools. There's our conflict. Does it belong in the schools or in the home? Most educational administrators minimize the teaching of controversial sexuality topics like contraception, sexual orientation, and alternative sexual behaviors because of their effect on political pressures. Joseph Drake, James Price, Christine Baksovich, and Margaret Walensky conducted a study about the preferences regarding school sexuality education among elementary school children and parents, yielding a survey resultant of 712 participants of parents with school children betwixt the ages of 6 and 11. In these age ranges, most parents agreed that discussing dating and relationships as opposed to abstinence and refusal of sex was a better method to deterring sexual activity. However, they did support teaching of later subjects by the end of the 8th grade, with parents preferring birth control methods to being taught in high school or not at all. As the debate goes on, sexuality and stigma and stereotypes and secrecy to coming out in communication and choice are all very important. Um, sex and sexuality define us. There's no greater truth to that. The present claim of sexuality is more than just genital sex or physical sexual pleasure. More, the historical defining of sexuality as or sinful has been an abuse of standard human rights. The core argument is that sex and sexuality are important aspects of who we are and how we are perceived. In fact, regular sexual activity and being comfortable with one's own sexuality is generally healthier and indicative of a more satisfying relationship. Sexuality is the most significant aspect of a person and their identity, and those that challenge the norms and stereotypes while being stigmatized lead the way for more proficient and inclusive, healthier healthcare practices. In the end, we are all sexual beings and should be allowed to choose how, when, and to what extent we share this identity with those around us. While most people placate to social norms so that they don't have to be stigmatized or labeled as deviant, that does nothing to change the fact that they are in the labeled or deviant areas of sexuality because they are not within the norm, or the heterosexual norm, I should say. Most individuals or groups tend to internalize the stigmatization, which often leads to self-hatred or identity denial or concealment. The characteristics of many sexual minorities at some point within their lives have often having an adverse and deleterious effect upon their own psychological health and moral well-being do conceal or deny their sexuality for various reasons. For example, a female member let me go back. For example, a female member of military personnel citing that as a sexual minority, a talented soldier might hold back from taking a leadership position, or if any leadership position be severely hindered by her status as a sexual minority because of the adverse actions taken against LGBT personnel. But some of the skills, like crisis management, are often developed in the coming out process, which may make them better suited to helping others and in finding difficult or non-traditional solutions. The marginalization of LGBT leaders is an important and viable area of leadership study because of the ways in which leaders and leadership are thought about and enacted. LGBT leadership represents a distinctive leadership experience worthy of empirical attention. People are conflicted about how to represent their sexuality in the workplace, since it is well known that LGBT people feel vulnerable about their sexuality, and some do not want to be forcibly outed by their peers because of negative scrutiny or attitudes from others. But moreover, their concealment of their sexual identity also negatively impacts how they perform their workplace duties. The assertion that LGBT issues are only beginning to be scholarly research as part of the leadership framework is true. Furthermore, both heterosexuals and homosexuals marginalize bisexuals, which is referred to as bi-negativity, which often comes in three forms. It is viewed as illegitimate, unstable as a sexual orientation, is sexually irresponsible, or in a hostile manner. However, with a sample of 925 respondents, Brian Feinstein, Christina Dyer, and Vicky Bata, and Jessica Laddick, and Donna Duvall, in their article Willingness to Engage in Romantic and Sexual Activities with Bisexual Partners, Gender and Sexual Orientation Differences, they cite their results as being indicative of people on both the hetero and homosexual orientations tending to engage or imply that they are open to being with a bisexual partner. There was something I found out in my research that I actually legitimately didn't know and was actually quite astounded by, is that queer theory, which is a political theory, by the way, which challenges gender and sexuality stereotypes, actually developed within the auspice of heteronormativity. In fact, further insight that I gained from queer theory is that gender identity development under queer theory was directly linked to heterosexual norms. Yes, I'm astounded too. The general area of gender discourse is what determined the different avenues available to men and women from an early age. And it is there that we start getting into how sexuality and gender are important within the gender norms and roles. It is at that point which we begin to assess whether people fall within the particular roles within gender performativity and the degree to which they fall within stereotyped gender norms on a heterosexual matrix concept, which is actually not too far different from, oh, I can't think of it off the top of my head, which is not too far different from the Kinsey scale, except I imagine that the matrix is more of a dimensional or 4-point grid, kind of like, we did in calculus, mapping it. Yeah. But the end goal is to utilize queer theory to assess and deepen the understanding of gender roles and gender play. So yeah, it plays a big role. Coming out takes a considerable toll and makes a considerable impact on a person and the people they are around. It is this particular process which sexual minorities undertake, and when they hold leadership positions, it makes them, I believe, more qualified to be a leader because what they undergo, and in most cases, the leader's sexual identity or orientation may or may not be known, and it's currently unknown to what extent sexual identity may influence a person in their leadership role. Thus, it's relevant that the sexual orientations of the leaders are important factors for both the individuals and the groups, with the overarching emphasis of inclusion, collaboration, and diversity within the workplace. Because sexuality is an important part of our being. Now, there is one particular criminal case I would like to address, and that is the Bow Brothers case, in which the court made 4 major points concerning the case. The first of which is that the non-exclusivity of the evidentiary routes in the on-call case, on-cal, ONCALE, in case you're looking it up, that gender stereotyping is a way to prove same-sex sexual harassment. In addition, the second point that the court set is a new precedent in establishing that it is unnecessary for the plaintiff to prove that the employer's discriminatory actions is rooted in objective truth due to stereotyped assumptions which the Title VII presumed to eliminate. Title VII is a federal law on which bans certain types of discrimination in the workplace. Just an FYI. The third major point is the application of gender stereotyping is not dependent upon a displayed let me go back. The third point is that the application of gender stereotyping is not dependent upon a displayed contrast to gender-based behavior, which means I can be as frilly and fiery and flirtatious as I want with whoever I want. And that doesn't necessarily make me gay or give them the right to call me as such, which can be construed as sexual harassment. And finally, the fourth point, a major victory: sexual harassment need not be a product of sexual desire for the victim. Let's say you're an employee and you believe you're being sexually harassed, and you have a right to make a claim against sexual harassment even if your employer doesn't sexually desire you. They don't have to. What this court did was turn Title VII into a freestanding anti-sexual harassment law, or anti-harassment law in general, which I think it should have been from the first place. A little known fact is that I believe it was someone in the Senate that added that be added to it in a final amendment to try and keep Title VII from being passed, but it passed, and that's why there's no clear delineation of what exactly is sex or sexuality within Title VII. But there are several cases which, if you are seeking out an attorney for such a case, that you should also give your attorney. It's ONCALE, ONCALE versus Sun Donor Offshore Services, Inc., Price Waterhouse, Inc. v. Hopkins, Smith v. City of Salem, and Renee v. MGM Grand Hotel, Inc., and of course, the Bow Brothers case. Let's see if I can give you a brief summary of all of these. The 1998 on-call court held that the Title VII Act provides for the protection of individuals against offensive, intimidating, and hostile work environments, arguing that the Act makes discrimination against employees of the same or opposite sex as the employer criminally discriminatory. Ostentatiously, the court held a prevailing view against gender stereotyping until the Supreme Court rendered its 1989 verdict in the Price Waterhouse, Inc. v. Hopkins case, in which Miss Ann Hopkins was denied a partnership in an accounting firm because her co-workers wanted her to dress and act more femininely. The court held that Title VII bans discrimination not just because someone is a woman, but also because one refuses or fails to act as a woman. Being that sexual orientation is not a protected class, most attorneys use gender stereotyping to argue harassment cases based in part on the assumption that the attacker knew or suspected that the victim was gay. Furthermore, in Smith v. City of Salem, the court granted relief to a plaintiff citing that the fact that she is a transsexual. This is made possible in part because the Price Waterhouse decision does not exclude a basis for inclusion of non-gender stereotypical behavior. In other words, it deviates from the gender binary. Even though prove their gender nonconformity is generally a non-protected class. In the Renee v. MGM Grand Hotel, Inc., the en banc granted relief to the homosexual plaintiff Renee due to persistent abuse by his co-workers due to the overtly physical and sexual natures of the attacks, which are independent of the victim's sexuality. Let me go back just for a minute. An en banc court is a court in which there are 3 or more judges sitting on the bench rendering the decision. It is starkly different from a judicial proceeding in which there's a jury. The Supreme Court, with its 9 justices, would be considered an en banc court. I hope I summed that up in a pretty relevant way. The point that all this culminated to in the Bowe brothers case became a turning point in judicial affairs because of the 4 points I mentioned earlier. The application of the gender stereotype does not have to be based in a person's behavior, because, it's based on heterosexual norms and how people view things based in light of those norms. Kind of like beer goggles or rose-colored glasses. In sum, plaintiffs typically have a standing to prove same-sex sexual harassment claims, even if they are not indeed homosexual, via gender stereotyping. Let me rephrase that, because I just messed that whole sentence up, and I had it written out. The end resultant be that plaintiffs have a stand to prove their same-sex sexual harassment claims, even if they are indeed homosexual via gender stereotyping, thanks to the Bowe decision. And Bowe Brothers is B-O-H. And of course, brothers. Surely we can spell that. Which is a major turning point in sexuality cases and sexual discrimination cases. As it comes about queer politics, we've got the whole repeal of DOMA and the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and all of that, but all of this wouldn't be possible without the movements and activisms thus far. The politics of queer visibility and visibility politics in general began with the Lesbian Avengers, and I'm not certain whether they hurt or hindered the agenda, the political agenda for equality. They do make pivotal political statements regarding sex and gender in using their bodies as an iconic tool which uses the heterosexual perspectives and sexuality that is indicative of the heterosexual world to bring about their points, giving them social, political, and cultural legitimacy, power, and authority. But I believe the bold and flashy sexism has downplayed issues of sexism, racism, classism, and homophobia. As Ayn Rand points out in her article Appetite for Activism, The Lesbian Avengers and Queer Politics of Visibility. Another author, Gerard, postures that queer is becoming too ambiguous to be used as a critical political tool, and that it is unclear as to how the diaspora of sexualities is viewed and what impact they will have on political intersections of queer theory and queer ecology. Um, this is directly out of Greta Gard's article, Green, Pink, and Lavender, Banishing Ecophobia Through Queer Ecologies. She draws together sexual and biodiversity for a larger picture, trying to contribute to health, strength, and survival in human society. Greta Gerard goes on to say that heterosexism and queer fear is used to generate public interest and a sense of urgency to act to divert attention from health and environmental problems, which I think she may be right. The end goal for queer/homosexual or gay, lesbian, bi, trans, and even some straight people is to get the LGBT community visible and salient. What I mean by salience is its voice to actually have weight and matter, like that gavel coming down judge's desk. In her article, Queer Politics in Schools Around Syrian Reading, Claudia Ruttenberg explains the adverse effects of queer politics upon queer students and teachers and how they've been treated, and the importance of advancing queer politics. She delineates between heteronormative sexualities and all non-binary sexualities, referring to all non-conforming sexualities as queer, which lends weight to the argument of what do we call ourselves. She also points out that many places like the Salt Lake City School Board, as represented by their 1996 decision, would rather ban all non-curricular clubs from the school district than to allow a single gay-straight alliance, or GSA for short, from being admitted as an official school club, going on to argue that invisibility may be more useful than being visible because of the difficulty of obtaining the right level of visibility, certain discernment of political risk, and benefits of queer students and teachers is necessary for analyzing who actually benefits from the disclosure of their sexuality. I, for one, would argue that LGBT individuals benefit the most because in being out they can be more themselves and be happy, which actually influences them and their behavior in general instead of trying to hide it or deny it being self-effacing. They can be out and proud and embrace it, which leads to them acting more who they are than who they are trying to portray themselves to be. In other words, kind of lying to society. Why lie? Why not be yourself, be strong, and go the mile, go the distance, show the world who you are. The term queer is more or less equal because it's broader than gay or lesbian, giving plurality to sexual attraction and sexual emotions. Identity-based sexuality is key to visibility and saleability within queer politics, rendering a transformative process betwixt the queer individuals as they come out and their social environment, which fundamentally tests the salience of gender binary systems as they attempt to bring down the idea that only binary gender is intelligible. Queer is a broad identifier that represents the lesbian, gay, bisexual, intersex, transgender, and two-spirit political communities, and more. What exactly is queer? Queer is the dramatization of the inconsistencies between chromosomal, sex, gender, and sexual desire, as identified by Rittenberg in her 2010 study. Queer is also a derogatory term when someone never self-identifies or identifies others as due to traumatic or violent repressive actions done to them or others because of their sexuality in reference to being queer. In addition, queer should not be looked at as an identity but as a political subjectification so that there is not any political recourse. The advantage of salience comes in when allies and alliances are added into the overall picture. Because there are over 3,000 gay straight organizations which are registered with the National Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education, known as GLSEN. However, it's made poignantly clear that GSAs are rigidly negotiated discourses of heterosexual visibility, of homosexual visibility within the heteronormative world. Wow, I'm surprised I did not catch that as I was writing my lit review. Utilization of tools such as the Day of Silence and calling gay for a day, racial identity and political subjectivity, with the end goal being visibility and salience. I'm totally basically reading you my lit review, not word for word, backwards. Queer politics has shaped both political theory and the historical movement of LGBT rights, shaping worldviews of sex, gender, sexual orientation, queer theory, and how LGBT individuals have been purged from places of employment and education. Queer politics has been shaped by the historical LGBT representation. These representations include gender roles, the importance of sexuality, and the education, support, and discrimination of LGBT individuals and groups. So in sum, I think sexuality and sexual education is a large part of who we are and how we represent ourselves. And I think it culturally and relevantly important that we all recognize the sexuality within ourselves and within others. In the pagan community, we have a saying, or rather, more so in the Wiccan community, Namaste. It means the god or goddess in myself. Recognize the god or goddess or that which is godly within you. So what I'm arguing is that the sexuality in us should recognize the sexuality in others, therefore realizing we are all human, we are all equal, and sexuality is part of who we are. Wow, almost an hour-long video. I'm not exactly sure how to conclude this. I will be putting Ashly Mardell's video, or a link to it, down below, rather. Her video is What Do You Call a Queer Person? And at this point, after just reading the of my lit review for my upcoming dissertation to you backwards, I have come to realize, or the ostentatious realization, that queer should be the proper term. And that is my answer to Ashly Mardell. We call ourselves queer, whether we're gay, bi, demi, asexual, transgender, two-spirit, gender nonconformant, gender fluid, questioning, queer, whatever you choose to identify as in this giant global world that we call Earth. It is you, and we are all queer. In fact, I would argue that straight people are queer, but, let's not overbridge this too far just yet. Labels do help us identify with ourselves and others, so it's fine if you want to call yourself a lesbian, or gay, or straight, or bi, or demi, or asexual, gender nonconformant, gender fluid, two-spirit. Use those labels to help you feel more empowered, more yourself. Be strong. Be who you are. And most of all, be true. True to yourself. Because there's no one else in the world like you. Well, yeah, because you are you. Sure, there may be other lesbians, other gay people, other demi, other pan, but just because that's how they have sexuality doesn't make them you. I, myself, just so you know, I'm demisexual. If I have romantic / and or sexual feelings for a person, I will chase after them. And that is irregardless of gender. But without those feelings, I'm not really going to chase after them. I might flirt with them a little for the practice of flirting, but that would be just about it. Because, we all can't have too much practice. But please let me know in the comments what you think about what do we call ourselves within this LGBT community. And please take a look at Ashly Mardell's video, because it is a must. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening, America.